Miko, are Hamas to blame
Are Hamas to blame for what?
for the war in Israel, the current war?
No, of course not. The war did not begin on October the 7th. The war began in 1948, or shortly before 1948, when the Zionist movement declared war on the Palestinian people and established an apartheid state in Palestine. And ever since then, there's been an ongoing assault on the Palestinian people who have never had a military force, never had a tank, never had an army. And what we're seeing now is a flare up, because over the years, there have been times when it was more quiet and times when we've seen flare ups. And so what we're seeing now is another flare up of this ongoing war against the Palestinian people. And in this particular case, this particular flare up was initiated, of course, by the attack from the Gaza Strip. But this is not the war. This is one part of a much longer war, and it's ridiculous to blame the Palestinians for the war since they have been on the receiving end of enormous amounts of violence.
I think a lot of people don't blame the Palestinians. I think they blame Hamas.
No, Hamas is a group of Palestinians. Hamas is one group. The fact that they happen to be Hamas, they could have been from another group. It doesn't matter. As a resistance organization, these are Palestinians who came out of Gaza. And so whether you blame the Palestinians who are members of Hamas or you blame Palestinians who are members of another faction, the resistance would not have been, it's not like there would not have been resistance from Palestinians if Hamas did not exist. And so this particular, perhaps, event, these particular fighters happen to be affiliated with Hamas, but I don't think it's that important. I think what's important is that these are Palestinians who are engaging in an act of resistance, as all oppressed people have the right to do.
Yeah.
Well, Miko, you described this as a flare-up. Hamas burnt and beheaded babies. They targeted hundreds of young people at a peace festival, and they paraded a woman that was raped through the streets of Gaza, which you then describe as a flare-up. Let's talk about history. The United Nations declared two states in 1948, a Jewish state and an Arab state. Within 24 hours, 48 hours of that, the Arab states tried to invade the Jewish state. That's the truth in terms of two states. It began with two states as declared by the world, and the Arab world was not prepared to accept that. If you then wind the clock forward many, many decades, you know full well that Ehud Barak, Olmert offered the Palestinians 99.9% of what they claimed to have wanted in terms of a two-state solution, and Arafat walked away from those respective peace processes. And isn't it true that the real issue here is Hamas don't even want a two-state solution? Hamas are committed to a one-state solution, which is a Palestinian state without any Jews in it. And is it also not true that Hamas are not simply some independent entity? They're controlled by a rogue state called Iran. Is that not factually correct? So we need to differentiate between the Palestinian people and the actions of a terrorist organizations, Hamas. You talk about occupation. In 2005, Israel left Gaza unilaterally because the world asked them to do so. Within days, Hamas had taken over Gaza, and the rockets started, the attack started, the terrorism started. And for those who complain about the constraints and the restrictions placed on Gaza, what October the 7th demonstrated was, unfortunately, was that those constrictions and restraints, although they failed dismally on that day, were necessary. The brutality that were committed, by the way, not against soldiers or military personnel, even that would have been unjustified. This was against innocent civilians, beheading, burning babies, targeting young people. This was the worst loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, and the most heinous acts of violence. And in your opening remarks, all you were able to do was talk about a flare-up. I mean, I find that extraordinary.
Well, I find extraordinary that you started and ended this list of things that have been proven to be untrue and are known to be untrue from start to finish. But you started and finished with what has been refuted very early on, and that is the story of the beheading and the rape. So these two claims that came out very early on after October 7th were lies, and they have been proven to be lies, and they have been refuted, and yet you repeat them over and over again. So I think that is indicative.
You deny that babies were found in ovens.
I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt. I did not interrupt you.
Okay.
I did not interrupt you. I listened to your diatribe of lies patiently. So now you're going to have to afford me the same courtesy. So you began and end by repeating lies that have been refuted several times over and over again, even by the Israeli media. So that is, we need to put that to rest. Now, your revisionist history, has nothing to do with reality, and I don't see any point in going point by point by point. It would be very easily done to refute every single one of the claims you made about the history. None of it is history; it's all fiction. First of all, if you want to talk about the partition plan was a plan that was imposed on Palestinians. There's no reason for them to accept it, number one. And number two, immediately after November the 29th, by early December, the Israeli Zionist militias already began with massive campaigns of ethnic cleansing and massacres. So we know this historically. This has been stated by Israeli historians. So this is also not true. And of course, it wasn't until the British left in May, some 6 months later, when almost more than half of the Palestinians were forcibly evicted from Palestine, that the Arab armies tried and failed to come in and help the Palestinians. So, I mean, it's very easy to sit there and repeat all these ridiculous lies and then accept and then use that as an argument. But nothing you said is true. Everything you said is easily refutable, as I believe I just did, although maybe not every single detail. And I go back to the very claim that I made earlier, that a war that was declared against the Palestinian people is continuing. The Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip, whether they are members of one faction or another, makes no difference. Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip came out because Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip have been engaged in resistance long before Hamas. The Gaza Strip has been subjected to enormous amounts of violence by the state of Israel going back to the early 1950s, as soon as the Gaza Strip was established.